What is up? Already got some viewers, so this is pretty good. Normally, I just record this on a random morning, evening, afternoon, whenever I get an opportunity to, but I decided let's do something a little bit different. Let's do a live episode. This is the Eagles Power Hour for any of you guys who have not seen or listened to any of my crap before. This is an Eastern Washington based podcast, talk a little bit about everything. But this is going to be on the FCS Fans Nation YouTube network. So, guys, they have a lot of different awesome podcasts there that if you hate Eastern Washington, you don't have to listen. There's the Splitting Hairs podcast. That's, a South Dakota State podcast. There's Around the A-Sun. There's Straight Out of the Whack. So there's a whole bunch of different podcasts, a whole bunch of different, content for you guys to watch. But if you like Eastern Washington, well, this is the podcast for you guys, hopefully, unless you think I absolutely suck, then it's probably not the podcast for you. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about, right? It is playoff weekend. We normally, Eastern Washington fans, we've been pretty spoiled. We normally don't get to play Thanksgiving weekend. When we're in the playoffs, it's normally a bye. We get to eat our turkey, get drunk for a few days, and watch some games. So during this podcast, it's going to be a little bit different than normal. I'm going to say, hey, ask any questions you want. We're going to post some things like Patrick here. You and I stinks. It's you and I stinks week. So, hey, I support that mission. I support that type of message. But yeah, anyone who is listening, if you want to react or if you want to ask anything specific, you can jump on, you can comment. I will do as much as I can to look through some of the comments. And if I think one is valid enough, I'm going to post it. If I think it's a crappy comment, I may not post it. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, this is going to be a fun game. Like, this is what the FCS is all about, right? It is the playoffs, FCS playoffs. This is what separates us from the FBS, besides the scholarships and low budget and all this. But this is what makes the FCS super exciting. So I absolutely love the playoff season. Eastern Washington, my team, we've had a nice little run the last decade. Hopefully we can continue into the 2020s, but it doesn't get easy. Single elimination, no bowls, no participation trophies. This is it. This is the pinnacle. Every single week, it's win or go home. And we got a tough battle, and there's a lot of good teams in the field this year. Let's kind of look at the bracket. I'm going to share my screen. Let's go here. Window. Okay. Let's look at this bracket a little bit, because this is kind of impressive. How deep the playoff field is. Hopefully you guys can see that. Here, I'll get rid of my ugly face. Okay, so of course the seeds we had this year, we had everyone from, Sam Houston State, who was the national championship team in the spring. They got the number 1 seed, which guess what? They were undefeated. They deserved it. They went 10-0. They didn't have the strongest strength of schedule, but other teams that had an opportunity to be ranked ahead of them, they lost. So guess what? Sam Houston State, you got a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, and you've played phenomenal this year. You're the 1 seed. North Dakota State, 10-1. They lost to their rivals, South Dakota State, in a not very competitive game. The score shows something a little different. But overall, North Dakota State they've looked every ounce of dominant as maybe they have in some of their weaker championship runs, right? And when I say weaker championship runs, that's still a team that won a championship. So they still look pretty dominant. Their defense is playing lights out. ETSU, Eastern Tennessee State University, they went 10-1. They had a big win over Vanderbilt. So, of course, they deserve to get seeded, right? When you go 10-1 versus the FCS and you have a 20-point win over a really bad SEC team, but it's still an SEC team, that is a seed-worthy team. Montana State, they lost 1 FCS game. It was to their rivals. They're a seed. This is how deep the playoff field is. And I'm only talking about seeds right now, and then we'll kind of go over different quadrants of the bracket and stuff like that. Villanova, they lost 1 game this year. They also beat James Madison. They got the 5 seed. Montana, the 6 seed. They lost 2 games. They had a huge win over UW, who was number 20 at the time. Plus, they beat their rivals, Montana State, that was a complete domination. They deserved a seed. James Madison, they're the number 3 seed. All they lost was to Villanova. They beat everyone else. And then you have Sacramento State, who is kind of sneaky this year. A lot of people, including me, I didn't have really much hope in Sacramento State. I didn't think they'd be the bottom dwellers or anything like that. But they got the 4 seed because guess what? They went 9-2. They won the Big Sky outright. Now they didn't play Montana State. They didn't play Eastern Washington. They didn't play Weber State. But they beat Montana. They beat UC Davis. UC Davis is a playoff team. Montana's a playoff team. They went 8-0 in the Big Sky. They lost to Northern Iowa in the really early beginning of the season where they kind of realized, hey, we need to make a change. O'Hara is not going to throw 53 times again, ever again. So now they run a 2 QB system. They look pretty good. So those are your seeds. Of course, Eastern Washington is slipping on the outside of that, but we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, in a little bit. But you have Stephen F. Austin. They were one of the last teams in Incarnate Word, UT Martin, Missouri State, Sacred Heart, Holy Cross, UC Davis, South Dakota State, who I would hate to be Sacramento State right there. Looking at that side of the bracket. Now, yeah, if UC Davis wins, you've already beat UC Davis and you kind of handled them. I don't think UC Davis is winning this game. It's at South Dakota State. I mean, in terms of being a 4 seed, you probably got the most dangerous team coming out of a non-seed. South Dakota State, they could beat anyone on any given day. All of their losses were really close. One was a Hail Mary loss. One was, and that was to their rival South Dakota. The other one was they went for 2 in overtime against Southern Illinois instead of just kicking a field goal where it would have sent it into double overtime. That was a risk they were willing to take. It did not pay off. Florida A&M. This is on the right side of the bracket in Jay Madison's. This is pretty cool. They were a third place team out of the SWAC because the SWAC has 2 different divisions, right? They're going to play a conference championship. I wish every conference did that, but the conference championship takes those teams out of the playoffs because it's during the first week. So Florida A&M, they were 9-2. They deserved a bid. They lost one FCS team, and it was to Jackson State, who is numbered, top 10 in the nation, something like that. Southeastern Louisiana, Cole Kelly. That dude's a beast, right? He's one of the Walter Payton Award finalists. He's got a really good chance to repeat. They made the playoffs. Northern Iowa, this is the one where a lot of people have some head scratchers, right? They're 6-5. Most people thought in this deep playoff field, they probably didn't deserve it. There was a lot of arguments for Mercer, a lot of arguments for other teams. Guess what? Northern Iowa has 3 playoff wins? Like wins over playoff teams in this bracket. They had the number 3 strength of schedule in the nation. They only had 1 bad loss. The other losses were to other playoff teams. Northern Iowa is a team that could beat anyone in this playoff. They can also lose to anyone in this playoff. That is the weird thing about Northern Iowa, but when the last weekend happened and you had all of these bubble teams start to lose, one of them was going to get sent home. And guess what? UNI, they have a better resume compared to most of the other teams. Davidson, Kennesaw. Okay, Kennesaw is going to absolutely blow out Davidson, the championship from the non-scholarship Pioneer League. Then you have Southern Illinois, South Dakota. Overall, this is an extremely strong bracket. And it's one of those brackets where I have really no clue what's going to happen. There's a lot of good teams here. What is that? Some of this, I'm going to keep playing this. Kylor's at least a closet Stephen F. Austin fan. Maybe. I am. Ooh, you know what? Good call. Look at this. I'm drinking an Axe Hat beer. I know it's not Stephen F. Austin. It's not their colors. But hey, it's an Axe Hat beer. So I'm gonna drink this. And then we got tons of comments coming in. So we may need to do some type of deep dive. I love it. And then we got Jamie Williams looking like a little lumberjack. Of course I am, because again, I am drinking my Axe Hat. Oh, that's probably why Patrick also said I'm an SFA guy. So thank you guys. Keep the comments rolling. If you guys have questions, I will do my best to really talk about some of the questions. But just looking at this playoff field and maybe looking at it compared to trying to think of the next playoff field that was maybe this difficult. I can't think of one off the top of my head. There is a legit probably 10 contenders that can easily compete, make a run to the quarter semifinals, where normally it's you got one team, those are your 2 favorites, and then maybe you have a couple other teams who could make a little bit of a run, but you're like, they're not really going to be title contenders. I don't know who's a title contender in here. You probably have 5 title contenders. You probably have 10 teams who can make a run to the semifinals. This is a very, very deep playoff field. And it was pretty crazy. I mean, most of the teams are 9-2, 8-3. Of course, you have a couple undefeated versus the FCS, like Kennesaw. They're undefeated versus the FCS. Same Houston State. They're undefeated versus the FCS. So it's going to create some fun matchups. But yeah, it is what it is. We'll kind of talk about some of the other things. Let's look a little bit at this maybe UNI Eastern Washington matchup, because this is what this show is about, right? This is an Eastern Washington podcast. This is not FCS Fans Nation podcast. This is not any podcast about any of your bum teams that some of you are commenting. It's an Eastern Washington podcast. So UNI, yes, they're 6-5. Some people on Twitter were saying Eastern Washington got gifted by getting the team with a worse record. Stylistically, UNI is not a team I want to play. It's not that we can't beat them. I think Eastern Washington has a good chance to beat anyone in the field, but they also have a good chance to lose to some of the teams in the field, right? But Northern Iowa is a spitting image of Weber State, just a little bit better on the defensive side. When I look at their offense, they're about the same capability of Weber State. There's nothing too impressive about their offense, but defensively, I think they're better than Weber State. They're better at stopping the run. They're better at creating turnovers. They're better at getting to the quarterback. They're really good at pass defense. This is the fifth team that Eastern Washington's played that has a top 20 passing defense. Stylistically, we don't want to play those teams. Give me the team that has the number one rushing defense and a crappy passing defense. I will take those odds all day. But when we're playing maybe a UNI where they're elite on both sides, this makes for a very dangerous game, especially a team who can turn over the ball as much as UNI can, right? This is not a team who's going to let you just march up and down the field, and guess what? Maybe you'll have to punt every now and then. They're going to be looking for the big plays. They're going to be looking to make you make mistakes. When they rush to the quarterback, they make the quarterback throw off of awkward positions. It's going to be interesting to see how Eastern Washington combats some of that. Now, the good news is we have played some of those teams. And all the teams that we've played that have these types of defenses, they were all close losses or close wins, right? Montana, probably a much more aggressive front seven than UNI, right? I think Montana's blitzing schemes is more impressive than UNI. When you start blitzing us, well, it's going to create some opportunities down the field, especially if you're blitzing us all game. There's going to be a little bit of gas that you have to deal with at the end of the game. I hope maybe UNI does that. It could make Eastern Washington start a little bit slow. But at the same time, UNI is also a grind them out team. If you saw what Portland State did to Eastern Washington in the first half last week, it was horrible to watch if you're an Eastern Washington fan. We scored at will. But Portland State did the best job I've seen this year of keeping Eric Berrier off the field, right? When people are talking about how do you beat Eastern Washington, or how do you stop Eric Berrier? Most coaches say you don't stop him. You just try and slow him down. Portland State probably did the best I've ever seen of someone actually slowing down Eric Berrier, and that was because Eric Berrier did not play in the first half pretty much. Portland State was taking their 2 to 4 yards at a time, running the clock down to 0, and then making a play, right? It wasn't one of those things where they're lining up pretty quick or just playing a normal tempo speed. They went, nope, we're going to play the slowest game in the world, which also made it a very fast-paced game if you're watching, in terms of it was over real fast. But yeah, Portland State, it was insane because of how much they just took off that time. I think in the first half, they were up, it seemed like 15 minutes on the time on possession. I think they still ended with 15 minutes. But the second, some of these comments, man, I like it. When's the next country album, bro? Who knows? I need you. I think you're a musician, right, Dustin? Maybe we should do a collab. We can do a little country episode. But what are you guys talking about? This is Washington. Look, this is Spokane, Washington. Now I'm in Houston. My cowboy hat's on the wall. You guys normally saw it with the last podcast kind of room I had here. But flannel, this is Seattle, man. Have you ever heard of Nirvana? Get out of here with that country crap. Jamie Williams, Dennis Merritt's going to be key. Yeah, Dennis Merritt, I think, is going to be key to this game. The big difference is he going to be able to get through Northern Iowa's front seven? Northern Iowa has a very good front seven. They have a really good run defense. The biggest difference is I think we need to use him, like we did more in the beginning of the year. We need to do quite a bit of screens against Northern Iowa. When they're blitzing, guess what? Run a quick screen. Have Merritt run to the outside because Merritt is one of the most versatile running backs in the Big Sky, potentially in the FCS. I mean, he's one of the top 3 scorers in the league. So, I mean, it's just basically a kicker, another running back, and him. So he's putting up tons of points, and it's because he's super versatile. He doesn't just have to be a running back. Like when you're comparing him to, let's say, an Afonso from Montana State, Afonso is a better pure running back. He is more physical. He can run up and down the field. But the difference is we don't use Merritt like a traditional running back. What we're going to do is he's going to run. He's going to run through the trenches. He's also going to swing into the outside. We can use him as a wide receiver. We can use him as really anything we want. So that I think Merritt is going to be a key to the game. We definitely have to get him involved early and often to make the defense really second guess. The good thing is, sorry, you're going to hear me pausing on some of this. I know, Mike. We all do, Mr. Councilman. Rusty, we loved him to death, but I killed him. He is gone. No, he's just been really busy this season. So hopefully we can get him back on one day. But unfortunately, you just got to look at my ugly face, Mike. So you know what? You do it. James is way cooler than you anyway. James Nugent. Is it Nugent? Or is it? Yeah, it's Nugent. I might be pronouncing your last name wrong, and I may have always my whole life, but I don't care, you Montana bastard. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we can do against this Northern Iowa defense because they are elite. The good thing is they don't play the best offense. Our defense, I think they are underrated in the grand scheme of things. Most people, they just look at total yards, total this, total that, instead of really efficiency numbers. And one of the things about total yards is, have you seen how much Eastern scores and how much the offense is getting off the field? Yes, we're going to give up more total yards to most teams. It is what it is. The other team gets the ball way more often than the average other team playing a non-Eastern game. The difference is our passing efficiency defense. Now, when I'm saying our defense is underrated, I'm not saying they're elite, right? I'm not saying Eastern Washington has this elite passing defense or this elite rushing defense or this elite turnover machine, but they're efficient, especially in the passing department. I think we're rated number, right around 30 or top 25-ish in passing defense efficiency. We're right around there with Sam Houston State. And a lot of people go, Sam Houston State has this elite defense. We're up there. Now, rushing defense, that's something we do struggle on. And that's something we need to improve, right? If that is one thing that makes if that's one thing that makes me a little nervous is whenever we're going against a really good rushing team, we have a hard time stopping them. They can normally get 4 to 5 yards at a time. And guess what? If you can rush 4 to 5 yards at a time, take time off the clock, get first downs, keep Eric Berry off the field, you have a pretty dang good chance to beat Eastern Washington. Let's just be honest. Now, Eastern Washington, like what Montana saw in the early part of the year, all we really need is one quarter, and we can turn it around and make a team hate their lives. But if you are a really good defensive team, especially on the passing side, and you are really strong running the ball, you have a really good shot to beat Eastern Washington. And that's what makes the whole path for Eastern Washington. Let me scroll down because you guys aren't even looking at our bracket. But the whole path to Eastern Washington is what I would consider horrible matchups. If you guys can't see it, maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, there you go. Horrible matchups. Stylistically, I said on the FCS Fans Nation podcast, if you guys were watching, styles in this postseason is going to make for matchups. Okay. I think we got for our actual bracket, we have the toughest stylistic matchups that Eastern Washington could have probably ever hoped for. We're going to go play Northern Iowa. We already talked a little bit about them. Really good defensive team. Mediocre offense. They are an exact replica of Weber State this year, but just better on the defensive side of the ball. And guess what? Weber State beat Eastern Washington. Now, I don't think it was Weber's defense that really did the trick. Our special teams completely failed us in that game, right? Weber State, they kicked, 3 or 4 fake punts? So I guess they didn't kick it, but they had 3 or 4 fake punts that really just turned the field around. Eastern Washington missed a field goal or an extra point. I mean, that was one of those things where we should have probably beat them, but we didn't. And UNI is a better defensive team than we were. About the same offense. I think like across the board statistically, it's about the same. But defensively, they're going to give us a lot of problems. And then we have to go and travel to Montana, right? When we played Montana in the first time, it was a fantastic game. If you guys did not watch it, ESPN2, Under the Lights. I mean, even the Montana fans after the game were like, okay, it sucked we lost. What a fantastic game. It was a fantastic game. They were matched up pretty well. Their strengths versus our strengths, our weaknesses versus their weaknesses. The difference was home field advantage seemed to be the kicker, right? Well, we got to play to Montana. We got to play in Montana. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to Waugers, especially in December. No one wants to play Montana in December at Waugers. And as an Eastern fan, I don't mind admitting it. I don't care about pride. I don't want to play Montana at Montana in December. Now, do we have a chance to beat them? Yeah, we beat them the first time. Do we have a chance to lose? Absolutely, we have a chance to lose. I think how these two teams play, home field advantage is clutch. And unfortunately, we got to go to Montana. And I've said this throughout the years. It is extremely tough to beat a good team twice. It's almost damn near impossible to beat an elite team twice. I would say Montana's in between those two categories. They're better than good. I don't think they're quite like elite like an NDSU or James Madison, but really extremely hard to beat that team twice. We already did it once. The odds are not in our favor. Now, there's some simulators saying it's in our favor, but that's by 1 point, which means avoid that betting game at all costs. When the simulators are 50% accurate, guess what? Don't do it. Now, let's say we get by UNI. Let's say we get by Montana. And let's say James Madison does their business because I think their side of the bracket is pretty favorable on that lower side. I don't think Southeastern Louisiana has much of a chance against James Madison because their defense is not very good. And then Florida A&M, they're kind of the opposite. Their defense is elite. I don't think their offense is that good. So I think James Madison matches up really good against both of them. But if we play James Madison, guess what? That's another team, a very elite defense, a very good passing defense, a very good rushing defense. And they also got a really good, quarterback he's playing fantastic right now. Some of the James Madison people are saying the offense for James Madison is pretty brutal. But at the end of the day, they are still a top 10 offense. They're still a top 3 efficient offense. And Cole Johnson, their quarterback, he has 30 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, something stupid like that. Pretty dang impressive. So if Eastern Washington gets through all of that and then we, somehow beat James Madison, on the top side of the bracket, it looks like it's a shoo-in for North Dakota State. And then somehow, let's say we beat that, which I don't think we match up well with North Dakota State at all. They can run the ball. They have the defense to stop us. But let's say we somehow get past them. Now, what are we going to play? South Dakota State, Montana State, Sam Houston? This bracket is brutal for Eastern Washington. And I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but if you were a betting man, I would not bet on Eastern Washington to win the championship after this bracket came out, right? I think we have the team and the talent to beat anyone in this bracket, but to do it 5 times and to do it with the teams that we're playing, oh man, it's going to be real rough. Let's see what Patrick said. We're going to go through some of these comments as well. So in our worst defensive performance against the run, we missed Jack. That was definitely big. Yeah, especially when we were going against Afonso, right? Yeah, when you're missing one of your best defensive players, especially a linebacker like Sendelbach, who is all over the place, that created a massive hole in the middle of the field, and Afonso took clear advantage of that. And of course, he's already one of the top 3 running backs in the nation, most likely. You can look at his stats, you can look at his performance, you can look at how he plays. He has an argument to be a top 3 running back in the FCS. He has an argument to hopefully make it to that next level. I'm rooting for any FCS player to make it to the next level. But yeah, when you're missing that key factor on your defense, that was tough. So, Jack was back. I like that. Maybe we should make a little shirt. Jack is back. He's going to be gone next year. But when Jack's back, totally a different team on the defensive side of the ball. He is the leader of the defense. In the run, it makes it definitely a little bit tougher to run on us. But even with Jack there, we're still not the strongest running defense. Like we're just not. I mean, it is what it is. I wish we can improve. But yeah, we'll see. Mike, I think the Eagles defense will be fine. Eastern's not losing this game with the ETSU chip on their shoulder, not on the Inferno. They definitely, the players have a chip on their shoulder, right? We've seen this throughout the threads. We saw some interviews. We saw some of the kids. We saw the fans. Eastern fans, they're pretty upset, right? Eastern players, they're pretty upset, right? The coach, I listened to Aaron Best's interview. He kind of had my mindset where he's like, dang, we're probably a seeded team worthy. Like we're worthy of being a seed. We are that good this year, 9-2, a really strong strength of schedule. But he said, hey, guess what? There was a couple games we didn't get it done. And coming into this, it was 50-50. We had a shot to be seeded. We had a shot to not be seeded with how the whole 3-team kind of conference cycle went with that round robin. I don't know. Who cares? I'll drink to that one because I forgot what it's called. He said, yeah, we had definitely a chance to be left out of the playoffs. It sucks, but this is a postseason. This is where you got to prove if you are good or not. So guess what? Aaron Best, he said they started practice on Monday. He's going to be really ready. Hopefully that team marches in there and they don't overlook UNI. I don't think they will. Pat, who's kind of our interim OC, he was on the UNI coaching staff. You know, he was their wide receivers coach. So round robin, thank you. But yeah, Pat, he was a UNI coach's wide receiver coach. I think he's going to have this team ready. I think he's going to say, don't overlook this team. And I don't think Eastern Washington's going to be overlooking this team just because UNI, I mean, they beat South Dakota State. They absolutely murdered Sac State. They beat Southern Illinois. They were competitive for the most part against North Dakota State, competitive against Missouri State. They only have one bad loss on their record, and it was an overtime game against Illinois State. And Illinois State used to be really good. They're just not this year. So that's like their bad loss. But I don't think we're going to be overlooking this game. I think there is a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I mean, it seems like for the most part, Eastern Washington always plays with a chip on their shoulder. It's like, you know, people make fun of the facilities. They make fun of the fan base. They make fun of the alumni, the donations. And it seems like half the kids, when they come in there, you know, they wanted to be FBS players, and some of them did not get those recruits. I feel like the whole mantra of Eastern Washington has always been play with a chip. At least that's what it feels like. It's protect the red, which I know a lot of the non-Eastern Washington people hate the red. Suck it. I don't care. but the mantra for in Eastern Washington is hardworking dudes. You got a chip on your shoulder and you got to prove it. You know, we may not have the fanciest facilities. It is what it is. We do our best with what we have, and we've been pretty damn successful. So let's see. What are some of the other things? Patrick, do I know if Pat was calling the plays? I don't know for sure if Pat if he was calling the plays. I want to say, man, I don't want to make an assumption. I think he had something to do with it, but I really think Aaron Best probably went back into that role a little bit. But again, I mean, all the praise was to Pat after the last two games of what he was able to do against UC Davis and Portland State. I mean, our offense looked just fine. But I'm not sure if he's the one actually calling the plays right now. I know, you know, after Ian Shoemaker left, there's a little bit of a, what are we going to do? Well, Aaron Best, he was an OC for what, 10 years? There's a lot of experience. Pat, he has a brilliant offensive mind. I mean, Eastern Washington's been without offensive coordinators. It seems like we get a new one every year and a half, every year. So it is what it is, but I don't know if he's calling the plays. I'm sure he has at least some type of influence if he's not calling the plays directly. I'm sure him and Best, they're kind of going over probably a playbook going, hey, what should we do in this scenario, You know, maybe Pat is calling the plays, but I'm sure it's on more of a short leash just because, you know, he's an interim OC. But again, I don't want to make anything up. I have no clue. Let's look at some of these other things. Because everyone hates us, we have the second most hated team in the conference besides Montana. That is absolutely true. It is what it is. When you start winning, you start getting hated. Besides Weber, no one hates Weber besides Kelsey Hatch. Like, I'm calling her out right now, and maybe she'll comment. Everyone else, they really like Weber. They got really nice fans. They got a beautiful stadium, beautiful scenery. And even though they've won the Big Sky, 4 of the last 5 years now, because they didn't win this year, they're not hated. Eastern Washington's really hated. Montana's really hated. Montana State is surprisingly not that hated, right? Montana State, we all kind of like them. Unless you're a Grizz fan, then you absolutely hate them. But overall, Montana State, we don't hate them yet. Now, maybe if Vegan really starts to crank this program up a notch to where it's Montana State, that's the dominant program of the 2020s, we'll absolutely hate them, because they have a loud fan base too, right? They got a lot of fans, beautiful facilities. We can easily start hating them real soon. Conway, yeah. I like Will Seiler, right? So Conway, if you guys aren't familiar, because this is an Eastern podcast and we're getting some of the WAC fans in here, that is Central Arkansas's field. If you've ever seen it, look it up. It is purple and gray, and it's striped. I used to hate it. The more I watch it, like actually watch games on it, I go, it's not as bad as I like. I would rather them have full purple. I think that would actually be pretty sweet. Purple with silver end zones, but hey, I like the color. It is what it is. Yeah, that's the thing. No one hates Weber. They are pretty solid. Looks like a tie for you. What? It looks like a tie you get for a wedding. Oh, the stripes on comment. Okay. Started going a little bit off topic there. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the whole selection committee, because there's a lot of people pissed, and it's rightfully pissed, right? Eastern Washington fans, the players, the coaches, you're allowed to be mad, but it also is what it is. I think we're all being mad at the wrong people, though. I don't think Montana's AD really had much to do with it, guys. I mean, I'll troll with you guys. I'll blame them too. At the end of the day, there's 4 Big Sky teams deserving of a seed. And when you look at it, how the committee looked at it was, okay, Eastern beat Montana. Montana beat Montana State. Montana State beat Eastern Washington. Then Sac State didn't play half the teams, so they're kind of out of it, but they're 8-0 in the Big Sky. You're going to give them a seed, right? So they're almost a lock for a seed. And then you're just looking at those 3. And then you have Eastern Tennessee. Eastern Tennessee doesn't have the strength of schedule as everyone else, but they're 10-1. They beat an SEC team by 20. I thought it was a guarantee they were going to get one of the top 8 seeds. So now you have 3 other teams. There's 2 seeds left. What are you going to do? I mean, Eastern Washington, they had the strongest strength of schedule out of those teams, but Jacksonville State was kind of being a jerk. They canceled our game. That would have gave us another Division I win, but unfortunately, they canceled the game, and we had to schedule Central Washington if we wanted to play a game. We could have just sat out and, played like a Sam Houston where they just did not play an extra game. They played a 10-game schedule. We could have done that too, but also that doesn't help us. Rather get some reps in there. We got some young players in because Eric Berrier and really the whole offense, they were out like the first play of the third quarter. So we got quite a bit of young players in. So overall, glad we scheduled Central Washington over no one. But yeah, that sucks, especially because Central Washington's better than one of the Pioneer League teams Montana State played. They're better than Dixie State, who Montana played. But at the end of the day, they still played D1 teams, even though they're crappy. We played a D2 team because that's all we had. So guess what? You got Montana, Eastern, Montana State. Each one of them are one-on-one versus each other. 2 of them have FBS wins. The other one has a very close FBS loss, which they really should have won. Montana State probably should have beat Wyoming, but also Montana State only had 1 FCS loss. They're locked for a seed. Now it's between Eastern Washington and Montana. Okay, we lost Montana State, and the score was close. The game really wasn't that close, guys. I will be upfront and honest about that one. The game was not very close. Montana State absolutely beat the crap out of us. It was a bad game, some weird play calling issues. But they beat us by 3. And guess what? Montana throttled them by 26 or whatever it was in the very last game of the year. Recency bias. They have an extra Division I win, if you will. that half scholarship Dixie State who's not even eligible yet. But it is what it is. They played by the rules. They got a seed. Like Aaron Best said, this was a 50-50 chance. We were either going to be on the inside or outside. On the FCS selection show, we asked, what do you think is going to be the seeds, the 8 seeds, before they started announcing? Everyone kind of announced it. I said Eastern Washington is not going to get a seed. And everyone was like, nah, you're lying, Kylor, because Eastern Washington had the strongest strength of schedule of all the other 9-2 teams. I was like, yeah, but it is what it is. We lost to Weber. We shouldn't have missed that extra point. We shouldn't have let them have 3 fake punts. It is what it is. So yeah, prior to the committee announcing, I even told like a couple of my Eastern Washington friends, just be ready. We're not going to be seated. Don't get your hopes up. We're just not going to be seated. And I was right. I thought we were going to go to South Dakota State, or I thought we were at least going to be on the road no matter what. I did not anticipate us beating UNI for a bid. Let's talk about that for a second. Northern Iowa, great facilities, massive stadium, good fan base, historic team. Eastern Washington, after the whole year and a half that we had with horrible media saying we're going NAIA, we're losing all of our teams because the media has this stupid biased narrative from 2 faculty members. Well, we outbid Northern Iowa. Now, I don't know if it's a smart move to spend that much when we're not the most financially stable program, but I like it. I loved how we outbid them. We're going to get a home game. At least I would rather play Northern Iowa in Cheney than go over to Northern Iowa. I'd rather stay pretty close to home as much as possible. But I thought it was pretty funny if we weren't going to get a seed that we outbid a Missouri Valley team, a Northern Iowa team. I think that's pretty cool overall. Talking about maybe some of the other playoff brackets, and really we're just going to focus on the Big Sky right now. The Big Sky, man, they got a tough draw in general. when you're looking at some of the other brackets, like it's pretty tough when you're the Big Sky team, right? So we're just going to go down. You have Montana State, right? They're going to play the winner of UT Martin or Missouri State. Missouri State was the number 2 team in the Missouri Valley. They finished the number 2. They have 8 wins, 3 losses. They also, I forgot who they played. Was it Oklahoma State or something like that, where they really could have won, and Oklahoma State is a top 10 team? I don't remember if that was the game that they played. It might have been another, but we'll just go with it, even if I'm wrong, because who cares? But they played a really good FBS team, and they almost knocked them off. Okay? They lost a couple games, one to North Dakota State. Oh, well, everyone's going to do that if you're not South Dakota State. But Montana State, you have a tough one because you're going to play Missouri State. No one wants to play the second best, third best team from the Valley in your first game. It is tough. The Valley is the best conference. I know that, there's a lot of Big Sky people out there. Big Sky is not the best. The Valley is the best right now, top to bottom. We may have, I don't even want to say we have like the better top tier. But top to bottom, Missouri Valley is just much stronger than the Big Sky. Now, Big Sky is the second best conference by far, especially this year. But the Missouri Valley is definitely a step above the Big Sky. We're trying to close the gap, but just when we think it's going to be closed, they get a little bit better across the board too, right? They had some really good hires for coaches. They recruit well. They have great facilities. And of course, everyone's trying to catch North Dakota State. So you're going to get better automatically because you're trying to reach that North Dakota State pinnacle. And North Dakota State elevates the whole brand of the Missouri Valley. But Montana State, you got Missouri State most likely in your first game. That is not a guaranteed win. I would say that's a 50-50 game. And Montana State played a really good season, and you got gifted with Missouri State. Why? Because it's regionalized. Okay, Sac State, you're the 4 seed. Guess what you got? You got South Dakota State on your side of the bracket. Now, maybe UC Davis is going to make the surprise upset, and then South Dakota State's road gets a little easier. I don't think UC Davis is beating South Dakota State. South Dakota State's getting healthy at the right time. I think South Dakota State is going to beat the brakes off of UC Davis. So that's the other Big Sky team. Big Sky team that's not seeded like Eastern Washington. You got South Dakota State. Good luck. You're not going to win. And then, yeah, Sac State. Good luck with South Dakota State too. You're not going to win. I just don't think so. And then you go to the other side of the bracket. You have Eastern Washington and Montana. Montana gets Eastern Washington. That's a tough game. Montana fans, yes, they're excited because it's Eastern Washington coming to Montana if they get past UNI. And UNI, like I've said this whole podcast, they're no slouch. They can beat anyone in any given day. I think I would favor us in the matchup, but it's going to be a dogfight. But let's say we beat them. Montana gets us. I'm sure Montana would have rather played a lot of other teams outside of Eastern Washington in their first game. This is a game that you would have rather had in the quarters, semifinals, but it is what it is, right? So it's going to be pretty tough. The Big Sky, I think, got the toughest bracket out of all. Like when you're just comparing them all, they got a brutal bracket. And it's because it's regionalized. It does kind of suck. But when 5 teams from the Big Sky, 6 teams from the Valley are all in the playoffs, and then you have Sam Houston State and Stephen F. Austin, those are like the only teams west of the Mississippi, basically. I guess there's a couple Louisiana teams, but it is what it is. It is extremely hard because they're going to pair them all together. So the Big Sky got all Valley teams and another Big Sky team. That's what the Big Sky got. I would have much rather played Southeastern Louisiana, Florida A&M, Kennesaw, Davidson, Holy Cross, Sacred Heart, South Dakota. I mean, even though South Dakota is really good in the Valley this year, there's a couple teams I would have much rather played. But yeah, it's a tough road. Sac State, yep, they already got trounced by Missouri Valley 500 team. Well, UNI is a playoff team. Yes, they did lose early in the season, but I kind of already covered this. You might not have been on. That's when Sac State was still trying to learn who they were. They completely changed their system now. And they do look different. They look a lot different offensively. So Sac State at that time was using Asher O'Hara. He threw 53 times in the game. He was the only quarterback that played all game. After that game, Troy Taylor, and this is the brilliance of Troy Taylor, said, that's just not going to work. Asher O'Hara, he's not going to be our throwing quarterback. Now Sac State runs a 2 QB system after that. They've been undefeated since. And what they do is Dunaway is their only throwing option quarterback. Then Asher O'Hara, he is strictly a running quarterback now, right? He's very versatile. So that is the difference. Yes, Sac State, they did get trounced by a Missouri Valley team, and it's a UNI team. But UNI already beat 3 playoff teams. It's not like that's a bad loss. But if that game was played again with how Sac State's changed their offensive scheme, they wouldn't get trounced by UNI now. It'd be a very close game. They could probably win. They could probably lose. That's the thing about UNI, though. UNI can beat anyone in this field besides maybe North Dakota State. And they can probably lose to anyone in this field besides Holy Cross, Sacred Heart, and Davidson. Anyone else in the field, they could probably lose to. But they can beat anyone else. So that's the weird thing about UNI. But yeah, that's my thought on kind of the seeding thing that happened where there was a lot of upset fans. It is what it is. We just got to prove ourselves. That's my thought process on the Big Sky getting just a horrible bracket. I think there's a realistic chance the Big Sky can lose 70-80% of their games, right? I think that is a very realistic chance. Yeah, if people want to start asking stuff that's not Eastern related, that's fine too. So what's my take on ETSU? I think ETSU is a phenomenal rushing team. I really do think, it's them and South Dakota that have the 2 best running backs. Now, stats-wise, ETSU does. But I don't know what to really think about ETSU because of the strength of schedule they have, right? Their strength of schedule wasn't anything overly impressive. Now, the SoCon looks like they were improving, right? And I think they're on I think their SoCon's on the rise. But the last few years, the SoCon's really been not very great. This year, they did look improved. They almost got 2 teams in. If Mercer probably just scheduled a few more teams, right? They only played a 10-game schedule. They had a Division II game in there. So if they would have maybe played an extra FCS team and won, they probably get in over UNI, which would be pretty cool. And then maybe Eastern Washington would have got to play Mercer or something like that. But we didn't. So it is what it is. But I do think ETSU, their limit, I think it's the second round. Their limit is the quarterfinals. I didn't mean to say second round. You guys already played in the second round. I think the Kennesaw State versus ETSU game is a really good game, and I don't know who's going to win. I want to say I trust ETSU a little bit more than Kennesaw, but at the same time, Kennesaw has been kind of proving the doubters wrong this year. They had a couple of really bad games where they played close with Gardner Webb and, teams like that. But then they've blown out teams like Jacksonville State. They've blown out Monmouth. I mean, they've played really well. This is going to be one of those really, really fast games. Not fast-paced, but in terms of watching it, this game's probably over in 2 hours. They are going to run all over each other. I just don't know. I don't know which defense is going to be able to stop the other team's rushing attack more. I'm going to lean towards ETSU winning that game, but I think in the quarters they're probably going to lose is what I would just say. It's kind of my guess. Who wins? Incarnate Word's offense or Cam Ward or Stephen F. Austin's defense? Man, Ward has played a phenomenal season. He looks stellar. I would compare him as much as Cole Kelly. I think, in terms of quarterbacks, there's a tier 1, then there's a tier 2, and then, everyone else. Cam Ward's kind of on that borderline. He's really phenomenal. But the Southland has really not played any defense this year. I think Stephen F. Austin, without looking at the stats, I think they're in the top 20 for a lot of defensive categories. Now, also, they haven't played the strongest strength of schedule either. Now, they played Sam Houston, and they played Sam Houston really, really well, and they shut Sam Houston down for a lot of the game. But that's without Eric Schmidt. I would have loved to see what maybe Stephen F. Austin could have done against Sam Houston with Eric Schmidt, because if you were able to do the same thing with Eric Schmidt, and you maybe could have, we have no clue because it didn't happen, then I would feel super confident in Stephen F. Austin. I'd be like, oh, you are absolutely going to shut down Cameron Ward. But I don't know. I'm right now, I'm leaning towards, man, you're putting me on the spot. I haven't filled out my bracket yet, Dustin. I'm leaning towards Incarnate Word, but I think it's going to be easily a one-possession game. But if Stephen F. Austin can really work with some of the turnovers and maybe win the turnover battle and keep Ward off the field as much as possible, you have a good shot. You also have stud offensive weapons too, so that's going to help, because Incarnate Word's not the best defensive team, and I think you have a sufficient enough offense to really do damage on Incarnate Word. I think it's going to be a shootout. Maybe like a 45-38 type of game. No, maybe not that high. Maybe a 38-33 type of game or something like that. It's going to be a weird score, but it's going to be a one-possession game, and I think anyone can win on this one. I appreciate you for saying you forgive me on the pick. I'm rooting for SFA. Again, I got my axe. I got my lumberjack. It is what it is, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be a really good game. That's one of the more interesting games that I will be paying attention to in the first round. I like a few of them. I don't like a lot of them. Just be honest. There's going to be a few games I do not watch. I'll just follow on the stats. But that is an actual really fun one. The games I'm kind of most hyped for, if you're looking at it, is I really want to see what Southeastern Louisiana can do against Florida A&M, right? Both of them have pretty weak strength of schedules. The big difference is you have the number one total offense, that's yards, in Southeastern Louisiana, versus the number one total defense of Florida A&M. Which one's going to bend? Which one's going to break? I have no clue. I am pretty excited to watch that one. I'll be watching that right after the Eastern Washington game. Of course, I'm excited to watch Eastern Washington. I'm not excited to watch South Dakota State versus UC Davis. I think that's actually going to be a blowout. I'm sorry, UC Davis. I just don't have a lot of faith in you. And then other than that, Southern Illinois versus South Dakota is a game that I'm excited to see. They did not play each other in the regular season, so it'll be interesting to see. Southern Illinois, I like them. I like the Salukis. They haven't played extremely well towards the end of the season. I don't think they're going to pull this one off. South Dakota, they look a little bit better than Southern Illinois at the end of the season. But yeah, that's kind of my pick. If nothing else, let's do a little bit of a score prediction for this UNI Eastern Washington. I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds. Anyone in the comment, let's hear some of your score predictions, and we're going to put them on the screen. So UNI Eastern Washington, since this is an Eastern Washington podcast, let's get a little interactive. What are some of the scores that you guys have? And I'll put them on. And if you guys don't pick any scores, well, then guess what? I just have to ramble and talk about nonsense for a few minutes. But I'd like to hear some of the score predictions so I can tell all of you guys how wrong you are. Okay, we got a couple. Dustin Helton, 31-21, Eastern Washington. Okay, there's only been one team that's held Eastern Washington to below 30, or I guess really only 30 points. So that's going to be interesting. I think UNI definitely has a defense too. I like that score prediction. You got Adam 31-21, another 31-21. Okay. Ooh, Mike Nugent 35-14, a blowout. I would love that. Patrick 35-24, should have been 38, but we missed a field goal. Okay. That's a pretty good one. I hope we don't, man. The special teams has been pretty tough to watch. Hopefully they're improving because that is a big difference. Jeff, and then you got Eastern Washington 42-28. So everyone's leaning towards Eastern Washington. I think I'm going to do the same. I think I will pick Eastern Washington because I'm going to be biased and pick them always throughout basically this whole playoff, even though I don't believe that we're going to run through the playoffs. But I'm always going to pick them at the end of the day because guess what? I can. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I think this is going to be a lot like the 2016 Northern Iowa game when they came to Cheney. It was probably one of the greatest games that I have actually seen. I think we won on a fake field goal. So it was pretty cool. I don't think we're going to win on a fake field goal this time. But, here's another one. Depends on which UNI team shows up. But, yeah, Eastern wins by 12. That is very, very true. It really depends on which UNI team shows up. If the one that beats South Dakota State shows up, Eastern's in for a long night. If it's the one that beats Sac State shows up, Eastern's potentially in for a long night. But if it's the one that showed up against Illinois State, I think we're just fine. We can win by 40. I don't think we're going to see that. Northern Iowa does play normally pretty tough in the playoffs. If you look at like a lot of their historic games, they're really competitive in a lot of games. So I think it's going to be close. I'm going to probably say it's a 7-point game. I'm going to say it's going to be 34-28. Eastern Washington wins 34-28. That's my prediction. Puts us on a win, and then we'll have a really fun show to talk about next week. Maybe we'll even get some of these Montana guys on this podcast or something like that. I mean, I do have a fancy new setup, so it doesn't look like I'm just in this horrible office. I got a lot of Eastern Washington players on the board. You got your Cup, your Samson. You got even Ken Griffey. Now, he's not an Eastern Washington player, and he has worn a Grizz jersey before. So maybe I should burn that rookie card, but I'm not gonna. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game. Hopefully you guys all tune in. It's at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. I don't know where all of you guys are, but I'm in Houston, Texas, so I'm going to go by my time. Saturday, 3 p.m. Should be a good one. All right, go Eags. Boom.